All right, another episode of the Pineapple Perspective with Troy Hooper, sponsored by Pepper Lunch Restaurants. I've got a very special guest. As always, we only pick the best. This is Paul Tran. Paul, how are you?
I'm good, man. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
way to stroke my ego too. The best.
We're going to do a little bit more of that as we get into your intro. But Paul, I always like to start these conversations off with the thesis of this show is really to talk about hospitality and how every business is a hospitality business. You know, the old saying is every business is in the people business, no matter what they do. If you sell a widget, you still have to sell it to people. But I take that another level further because I think the opportunity to elevate anyone's business is to really adopt the mindset of hospitality. So I always start off by asking, Paul, what is your definition of hospitality?
As far as hospitality, I like to think of it as creating an experience or an environment to where people that you interact with, whether it be customers or vendors, or I think of the whole ecosystem. I think of how everyone is better for interacting with you, where how you do things, how you delight customers, how you operate the business, how you manage your staff, how you think about anything in your business, just is always leveling up the experience. It's always delighting people. It makes customers not just customers, but like raving fans, and they want to come to your store often, or they want to tell others about you, or they just want to support you as much as possible. Or when you're delighting your vendors, they're not just vendors, they're your partners. So when you're delighting them, they want to just give you more business. They want to see you grow because they can grow with you. And so I think of it, just hospitality in general, just as the most sustainable business model, where being generous actually helps you make more money, but also just helps everyone around you just be better in general. So that's what comes to mind when I think of hospitality.
Okay, we're going to get into your history in a few minutes, but before that, I want to set aside your history in the restaurant business itself, the operations, ownership, starting, selling, all that good stuff we'll talk about. But you're in the franchise sales business and you have been off and on for a long time or as part of your journey side by side to your restaurant ownership journey. So, in the franchise sales business, all the franchise salespeople in the world are listening to this podcast right now, but how do you bring hospitality to franchise sales?
To be honest, I think just coming with the mindset of generosity is actually the business model. I you know, there's I guess as far as sales is concerned, most people think of sales as very transactional. It's more like just trying to uh, hustle and get people interested and close a deal, and that is that. But what I've learned, being in the business for almost 20 years, is that it's a very small world, and relationships, your network is your net worth. And so being able to delight people, in your interactions, getting people curious about what you're all about, it I guess it just carries over pretty well when it comes to franchise sales, because most of the franchise deals that I've been able to put together have been through referrals or through people who have worked with me in the past. And you can't do that unless you've, maintained your integrity. If you've been a delight to work with, same thing as being in a restaurant or a hotel. Like when you have an incredible experience, you just want to come back again and support. I've been able to close quite a few deals where, they've been able to, uh, change their lives for the better, and they come back years later after they've built out a bunch of restaurants. They're like, hey Paul, I enjoyed working with you. What else can you do? What else can we work together on? So yeah, I think the rules still apply when it comes to franchise sales and hospitality.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that. Well said. So, talk to us a little bit about your history. How did you get to here? How did you get to where you've sold over 1,000 franchise units in your career? You've worked for some great brands. I think you're working for one of the best brands on the market today. And so, how did you get here? Where did this hospitality journey start for you?
I'd like to say it's a series of accidents. I have this philosophy where you should only be planning half of your life, because one half is where you use some of your knowledge and your experience to like plan the best set of goals possible, but you're also limited as a human, and there's also a lot of things working outside of your realm of knowledge that are that you could never expect and never plan. For example, my wife was completely my marriage, my kids, all the businesses that I've gotten into have always been unplanned, and it's just because I was just busy doing the best I can and operating from what I do know. But the things that have changed my life have always been unplanned. So all that to say, uh, getting into the restaurant business was an accident. I uh, There was a restaurant in Southern California that was always met with really long lines, and it's called the Boiling Crab, and it was Cajun crawfish. It was crawfish boils. People dump the crawfish onto the table, and people just have this unique experience of peeling with their hands and eating it. It was just an incredible, unique experience. And at the time, I was sick and tired of waiting for 2 to 3 hours every time for a meal, so I figured scratch my own itch and create my own restaurant. And my initial goal was to just serve people that were unwilling to wait for 2 3 hours like me. But through a series of other accidents, we can get into that because I know we're short on time. But if you want to delve into that, there's a series of accidents within that. But just through a series of unplanned, unexpected events, instead of serving the people unwilling to wait 2 to 3 hours, we actually ended up capturing all of the customers. And that pretty much took off. That's what launched my hospitality dreams and goals, because I never had planned that before. And that led to learning more about how to franchise, and learning how to franchise involved in learning how to sell franchises. How to sell franchises led to how to manage a multi-unit restaurant company. So it's just a bunch of Legos that stacked up that couldn't have gotten to where they were without just random occurrences that I just leaned into with curiosity and hopefully doing the best I can, and of course a spirit of hospitality. So that's the short abridged version of it.
So why do you think you snagged so much of the market share from Boiling Crab? Why do you think your one-off family style crab house concept was so successful? What would you attribute some of the success metrics? What would you attribute the causation of that?
Again, a freak accident and a serious, like, just hardcore ignorance. I will say that now I'm in a position of consulting people. I definitely need knowledge and experience, but I will say, to at least get started, I was just purely ignorant, because when it was time for me to open my restaurant and it was time for me to order the crawfish from Louisiana, uh, the vendors all laughed at me, because they said, you must be brand new, because there's no crawfish in season right now. And it made me think back, like, well, actually, Boiling Crab was always closed for two months out of the year. And
Hmm.
I assumed that it was because they went on vacation and they just wanted to chill. But I realized there's no crawfish in 2 months out of the year. So I was already paying rent. I was really stupid. I just figured that, man, we just need to open right now and just start serving customers. So we served food with our famous recipe without crawfish, but we used it on crab and clams and shrimp and other items. And during this time, very similar to how people crave Chick-fil-A on Sundays, people were craving boiling crab, but they had no other place to eat it at. So they heard about us. They told everyone, and so we went. Everyone went to our store. So a total ignorant accident. Everyone went to our store, and that's pretty much what built the brand, and that's what made our store busy right from the get go. And that also made us not dependent on crawfish as well. We were diversified with a few more menu items. So all this stuff sounds smart. It sounds like I should write it in a book, but it was all just pure accident and stuff in retrospect. So that's how it happened.
So do you think that any of the success of that store, let's set aside the fact you were open 2 months when the competitor wasn't, let's set aside that you served other items. You must have served a better recipe. You referred to your recipe. You must have served what you thought was a superior recipe for the boil flavor, etc. But talk about the differentiator between your hospitality and how you delivered hospitality in your restaurant, because that's going to lead to more of your story after that fact. So at this sort of juncture, you're sort of figuring this out. So how do you differentiate the type of hospitality you delivered at your restaurant versus, say, your competitor?
one of the things was we wanted to be a little bit more family friendly. At the time, Boiling Crab was very like about people who were willing to, go out, party after a party or club or before they party or club. They like to drink alcohol, and it's more like the party crowd. Whereas for me, I wanted to be a little more like family friendly, be able to make all the parents feel like they could enjoy food, but also there's something for the kids as well. There's also a kids menu. We also had, I think, also the people I hired were also family members for better or for worse, but it also kind of gave the spirit of a family type feel. And also, I think I was being very mindful of the fact that, because I had to wait for 2 to 4, 3 hours for a table, I was also very sensitive about people waiting at our restaurants as well. So we always would serve food and serve drinks and stuff for people waiting in line just to make sure they felt delighted. And it also worked out because, once you acknowledge the customer, just like when you go into a restaurant, the moment, the faster you acknowledge a customer, the more they're willing to wait. The more they're willing to support your store, even though it's busy. Same thing. We gave our customers free drinks, and we said thank you so much for waiting, and that just allowed people to wait and have fun, and they created waiting was actually a fun social experience as well because of that. So those are just a few of the little things that came to mind as far as hospitality.
So you go from this one-off friends and family style restaurant you put together and had a couple of partners in. How did you get from that to pioneering the franchise locations of Halal Guys in California?
Yeah. So there's 1,000 things that have happened, but by the second year of our business, we started getting a lot of franchise requests, and that was awesome because when I think of franchise, I thought of, wow, 20,000 McDonald's and stuff like that. So we're really honored, but I didn't know how to franchise, and so that set me on a path to learn more about franchising. I ran into a company that was based in DC. They also had an office in Newport Beach near where I lived, called FranSmart. And that's where I pretty much got a taste of what it was like to, franchise, take small brands and franchise them. And the goal is to take these mom and pop, operations into, putting systems and structure in place and set them up for hopefully massive scale. They were also famous for being starting the franchise program for Five Guys Burgers and a bunch of other brands, including the Halal Guys. And so during that time, I was just so fascinated with franchising, and at the same time, FranSmart was also looking to hire franchise salespeople. So it was a perfect storm, especially by that time I already had like a manager in place to run the stores on a day-to-day basis. So I double dipped. I ran the restaurant, and at the same time I learned how to be a franchise developer. So that's where I learned restaurant operations, line items, prime cost, cogs. I learned all the stuff that I didn't learn when I was in the restaurant. And I also learned how to sell franchises as well, how to prospect, how to look for the right partners. I learned what to do, what not to do. I've been fortunate to work with brands that have gone international, that have uh, that uh, that have also gone public, that have also been acquired, and also, of course, brands that didn't work out as well, which there are incredible lessons in that too. But yeah, eventually, in 2014 is when Halal Guys became a client. And throughout my travels, I love traveling. Every time I go to New York, I would always go to. I would I would pass the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building, just go straight to the line on 53rd and 6th, and just line up and eat food at the Halal Guys. And so when they became a client and wanted to franchise, I knew I couldn't just help them, you know, sell franchises. I also had a love affair with the brand too, and I wanted to bring it to my community. And so I used my contacts. I raised a fund. I built a team, and uh, I bought the franchise rights, and then we ended up building a bunch of stores here in Southern California. We did anywhere between 15 to 20 million out of 11 stores, uh, and yeah, that's how Halal Guys happened.
It's an awesome story. So, um, think about your time in owning the Halal Guys with your partners. How did you develop, or did Halal Guys come with a strong brand culture, a strong hospitality culture, or were you so early on that you found yourself having to sort of develop your own culture? Talk about creating culture within a franchise system and how that was different from your family-owned restaurant concept versus getting into really what became a national international sensation in halal guys. How did you formulate that, and what did that look like?
One of the things that I did love about Halal Guys as a customer was that they were always quite generous with their food portioning. Like whenever you order, part of the experience was seeing them just throw so much meat on and throw on the famous white sauce on, and that was a part of the delight. And so I always wanted to make sure that, of course, we needed to control food costs and portioning. We do need to maintain consistency, but we always wanted to make sure that the platters that we served were always a lot of meat and a lot of food, and make sure customers felt like there was value. And even when we had to start portioning things and make sure each plate was consistent, um, if we couldn't pile on the food, then at least we pile on the hospitality. Like that's how we make up for it. And so, again, it goes back to things like acknowledging customers when they first walk in, always smiling as well. When staffers smile, like the employees, the customers can't help but smile in return. That's just natural order of things. And then just always getting the order right, keeping the place clean. There's all these subtle cues that you don't think matter, but customers are mentally internalizing it subconsciously, right? And so, and at the end, it's always like, "Thanks for coming. We appreciate you." And we always get into this "Did you know" mentality, where did you know we also do catering, or did you know we also did we also have an app where if you order, you get rewards. And so I always like to just educate and delight just at the end, just so that customers have that in the back of their mind, and yeah, keep this in mind for the next time they want to eat, eat with us, or they need catering, or they forgot that, hey, I'm already like here 3 times already, I should probably download the app and like get some rewards. So yeah, as far as the culture is concerned, like I'd say the culture of being generous with the food portioning came from the Halal Guys, but I'd say that a lot of like the stuff that I've learned running my own restaurants, as well as just hospitality things I pick up along the way, have kind of filled in the blanks.
So you've done a fair bit of consulting. Obviously, I'm accustomed to this, when you're visible in the market and you've worked on some brands and seemingly had some success, folks are always looking for advice, right? Whether it's email, phone call, introduction, LinkedIn message, people are always like, "Hey, I've got 2 or 3 stores. I'm looking to either franchise or not sure how to grow this business." So you and I are both used to sort of getting those inbound inquiries of, "Hey, can you just give me some advice or mentorship, et cetera?" So let's talk to the emerging brand folks that you and I have a lot of experience with, and whether they have 3, 5, 7 stores, and they're thinking about franchising, they're thinking about growing their brand, they're thinking about what it takes to establish themselves as a scalable business. How do you talk to them about the idea of utilizing hospitality, sticking to their core values, really focusing on culture, focusing on that surprise and delight and customer connection? You've talked about a couple of those elements, but how, when you're talking to these folks, it's really not about ones and zeros and can you pay a fee and you can register a thing and you can market your brand, but really, what is the marketable, intangible feeling that this brand can develop? How do you tell people how to create that thing that seems to be elusive to a lot of folks?
Wow, really good question. I think a couple things. I think that I usually warn folks ahead of time that not everybody, yeah, you can franchise, but not every brand should franchise. And I also tell them that there are no shortage of other ways to grow a company as well. And sometimes, when people are looking at Entrepreneur Magazine or Fast Company or Fortune, they think of like they get tempted by like crazy scale and massive growth and all that. And it's funny because what is it? It's the whole confirmation or survivorship bias. Like for every brand that has taken all the risks and maxed out all the credit cards, and they become massively successful, there's probably a million more people who followed the same route and they failed.
Yeah.
There's also plenty of companies who have become massive successes and they never had to franchise. Think of In-N-Out Burger, for example. Like there's franchising can be sexy, but it's not the only way forward. And so, and it also changes the DNA of the company. So I usually preface conversations with that, because even though I've made my wealth and my connections, and I am a champion of franchising, there's a lot of brands I tell them you probably shouldn't, and it's okay. There's more ways to go about it. Other things is, I usually tell them there are a couple checklist items to make sure that you are set for franchising. A lot of it is, I usually tell people it's not actually, you posted about this on LinkedIn. I love it because, early on, you don't have a lot of crazy track record. You don't have crazy numbers to show off to investors. So you can't pretend like these numbers are gospel. Like at the end of the day, you need to start with the story. You need to start with the mission. Why people want to get behind a mission. Do you have a mission that is worthy of championing? And people remember stories more than they remember data. And they also care about the team. And early on, when you invest in something, you invest in the people, not the idea or the concept. So yeah, you have a really cool concept, but there's no shortage of concepts that are dead in the graveyard. It's more about the people. And there's countless stories of like how startup founders have become massive successes. And if you look at the origin stories, the concept didn't even start off. It wasn't even that concept to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took leadership to see the change in the winds, the removal of ego to like, or sunk costs to like change it to the right business model. And so it's about the people. So I also need to make sure that it's the right people. And then I also talk about things like hospitality. A clear example, I always say, Chick-fil-A and Raising Cane's, like they're known, yeah, they're hugely successful, but that's a lagging indicator, right? The leading indicator is that they treated people with incredible hospitality. The chicken sandwich is pretty good, but again, they over indexed on generosity, clean stores, incredible real estate, and my pleasure. People joke around with my pleasure, but they're just joking because they wish they did it.
Well, it's a Southern thing. So those of us in
Yeah.
California may not know that, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's no longer Southern, right? It's global,
Right.
and it's hospitality benchmark. But yeah, I just look to them and just say like, hey, it's more than just food. Like you said earlier, it's people business, it's hospitality. Food, it just happens to be the vehicle. So don't over index on the food. Don't over index on a cool concept. You need to over index on the hospitality portion.
Yeah, I mean, it's back to we are people serving people, right? And so, from a leadership standpoint, I've always said, as a leader, you are a leader that has to serve people so that they can serve people, right? And that's really this sort of win-win-win mentality. And if you add the fourth win, the win is the business as a lagging indicator, right? So, Chick-fil-A is the perfect example that you can do something the right way. You can quote unquote overinvest in culture, overinvest in training. You can't walk into a Chick-fil-A in sort of off-peak hours that there aren't 6 or 8 employees on iPads, right, that are doing their daily lesson. And whether it's a 5-minute or a puzzle or a video or a quick quiz, they're constantly reinforcing the importance and value of their customer, of the relationship, of their community, of the community within themselves. Similarly to In-N-Out Burger, right? It's really a family, and they pay well and they take care of their people and they have great empathy for the human. So I just think that that's something that, as we get into the idea of scaling our larger businesses, and I'm going to kind of parlay this into the multi-unit phase of your career, we work with a lot of multi-unit franchisees in what you and I both do, and we
Yeah.
have in our existence, in our history. So think, putting that hat on, now you're a multi-unit owner operator partner of 11 units. You have a team, you have a management team, and you're working inside of somebody else's system, right? The halal guy's system.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about how you honor the existing system, but bring your own touch to it? And what are some of the most important aspects as a multi-unit operator when you think about scaling and replicating time and time again? How does hospitality and the foundational blocks of what you've talked about so far, how does that scale? How does that work as the organization gets bigger and you touch less people less often, because you're broader? uh, share those thoughts as we think about multi-unit operators and multi-unit franchisee, folks that, or people that aspire to be a multi-unit franchisee like you were.
Oof, there's like 10 questions in there.
A little bit.
Well, I'll kind of piecemeal it, and feel free to like remind me if there's any questions I didn't answer. But the first one is, I'd say that ego is the enemy. And so I guess being in the restaurant and the franchise world for almost a decade before I decided to jump back in, I've learned that you you can't be it's hard to be a creator and an executor at the same time. The context switch is really bad. If you try to do both, you'll probably do a horrible job at both. For us and my team, like when I built the team, I managed expectations. I told each of my partners, there was 5 of us in total, that if we get into this business, we are not going to be creative people in that we're trying to recreate the concept. If we wanted to do that, we should start our own concept, and we should go that route. If we get into this business together, we need to trust the franchisor that they have a playbook that is already in place, that has been successful for like 30 years. 30 years is something you don't mess with, at least at its core. And we just need to be the most amazing executors. We need to execute the playbook. Where we can be creative is maybe, well, 2 things. The first one is, if we want to make suggestions, I've learned in my career that, franchisees of McDonald's, for example, when they suggested chicken McNuggets and Big Mac and the Egg McMuffin and all that, they did that. Those were franchisee inventions, but that was only after they've already executed at a high level, proven themselves to be good franchisees. Then they carry weight to being able to share feedback with the franchisor, right? I said, if you want to make any introductions, we need to prove that we actually are worthy franchisees first. That's the first thing. The second thing is, we can be creative in how we communicate with the local community, like how we can create collaborations with communities, of course, with franchisor approval, but that's where we can get creative. But with the playbook itself, we fell in love with the food. We fell in love with how people are treated, being able to have generous portions, and the colors. We don't mess with that. And if we do that, we have a chance to scale. And so that's the expectation that me and my teammates had before we even decided to team up. So I think managing expectations early on was really helpful. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's
Okay.
good. Look, there's no right or wrong answer. The idea is to stir the pot and see what you come up with, right? So
Yeah, I think another thing is, the halal guys, they built something really special, to where they, to be honest, even if they didn't franchise, they didn't have to. Like, they just had cult followings. Their brand is bigger than the number of stores. So one thing we did innovate was just, being able to elevate people. So one of my district manager, her name's ECAT. She was our employee number 1. She managed multiple Jamba Juices and a bunch of Old Spaghetti Factories and a bunch of other brands. And when we met, we were looking for, again, ego is the enemy. We all knew that we couldn't operate restaurants as well as someone who's knee deep in operations. And so we got out of the way. We looked for an incredible manager that we knew we would eventually develop into being our district manager, director of operations person. And we pretty much gave her the tools, gave her the parameters, and just step out of her way, and so that she can bring her own network, so that she can execute the playbook. We are just, giving her the tools and encouragement, and giving her a compensation where she felt like she could focus and she didn't need to look anywhere else, and just got out of her way. Uh, but again, it also goes back to managed expectations and just hiring the right people right off the bat. That was another thing that we did that halal guys did not have at the time. Being able to build a large multi-unit operation. I mean, for us, we built 11 stores. Halal guys, they had like 6 carts and that's it in the city. So that's something we had to pretty much kind of develop on our own. We also got a lot of mentorship as well. And also, again, just the fact that we knew that people could operate the stores better than we could, we didn't get in the way, and we just over invested and we overpaid on a manager that ended up being our employee. She's still with us to this day, even after I sold the company. So yeah, investing in people, back to people.
Absolutely. So you're a glutton for punishment, and you kind of like to work two angles all at the same time in your life. I resonate with that. I've always had sort of two big things going at the same time for most of my career. Um, so you decided to go back to sales. You did some consulting. You did a little bit of sales for another small emerging brand. And then for some reason, you've decided that Pepper Lunch is the brand that you thought you could bring your skills and experience and knowledge and resources and your network to. Why did Pepper Lunch resonate with you as a brand that you wanted to represent and help grow?
Yeah, definitely glutton for punishment. I just constantly need to be stimulated with like incredible brands. So, um, really cool story. In 2016, I've actually never made this public. So, Andy Nguyen, we have a mutual friend,
Yeah.
Andy Nguyen. At the time, Andy was getting a lot of franchise requests for Afters ice cream. And at the time, Andy didn't know how to franchise, and he's more of a creative than a business manager, which is something that's required for franchise development. So he heard about me, he reached out, we had a great meeting, and he got an inquiry from a potential franchisee in Australia. And this guy was trying to court Andy, trying to impress him, trying to give him the rights for Australia. So he paid for a business trip for me, Andy, and his partners to fly out to Australia to see the market, to make sure it's a good fit from a market perspective and people to people perspective. And so while we were out there, that deal never happened. But while we were out there and looking, we were just rolling around Sydney, and Andy was just on the lookout for like cool concepts to be inspired by. That's when I ran into Pepper Lunch. And I saw this really weird, unique concept where I saw everyone was cooking at their table. They're doing something weird at their table. And the smell of the pepper margarine or the pepper paste was just like emanating, just like In-N-Out's. Is it true that In-N-Out fans the smell out to the rest of the
I
center?
think they cranked the air conditioning up to blow out all the
Okay.
doors and windows. Yeah.
All right, that's the conspiracy. But same thing. I just smelled this amazing buttery smell. I stepped in and I just saw this really unique model where they were bringing hot plates of sizzling food out to the tables, and because it was so wild and unique, I decided like I had to try it too. So I sat down, ordered the food, and that's where I fell in love with it in 2016. Since then, I was busy with other works, and I just figured they probably weren't franchising, and so I just pretty much left it alone. But the rest of my career, every time we traveled somewhere internationally, I would see Pepper Lunch, and I would always eat there. And so I loved it as a customer, and it just never occurred to me that I could actually work with the brand. And it wasn't until after I sold my Halal Guys last year that that I was approached by you, and I've always admired and looked up to you as a leader in the restaurant and hospitality space. And when you reached out to me about maybe working together on franchise development, in my mind, I was already like, hell yes, but I had to hold my cards. Now that but I love the brand so much. And again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier about the people too. I love working with small emerging brands and the mom and pop founders, because they have this crazy grit of making the impossible happen. But I'm also really refreshed to know that Pepper Lunch has made the proper investments in leadership too, and that's the reason why they've been around for so long. I mean, they've been able to invest in the right leadership to maintain and take the brand to the next level. So it was just a perfect mix of same thing. I love, I got into the Halal Guys because I love the brand. Same thing with Pepper Lunch. I love the brand so much. And it only has gotten better because not just working with the leadership team, but now that I know how the unique service model works, I'm just even more like, I can't believe it's even better than I thought from an operations level. For example, like Halal Guys love the brand, but during busy time, they have like 15 people that I had to manage in the store. Whereas for Pepper Lunch, I'm looking at a super busy store and I'm looking in the kitchen, like in the little window, and there's like tumbleweed because there's barely any workers in there. And so there's just so many more reasons to love about the brand now that I've become more involved. But yeah, that's how it happened. Retirement is an illusion, and I'm more interested in sharing an incredible business with the world. So jumping back out of retirement, and here I am.
Well, we're glad to have you, and definitely a unique opportunity to do a podcast with somebody you work with, and but we both have that background story of we both have been a lot of places, seen a lot of things, and I think we know that when we saw the uniqueness of Pepper Lunch from from a perspective of an owner operator franchisee model, the quality of the franchisor that was being built and the leadership that was being added globally and the investment being added globally, and then just the quality of the product and the quality of the hospitality. I mean, the Japanese culture is, in my opinion, by far and away has the ideals of the highest levels of hospitality as a society. And so, really putting the customer and the quality of the ingredients and quality of experience first, and then really always thinking about how can this be great for our franchise partners so that they can succeed because their success is our success. It's just the right mindset. And you and I have been around this business a very long time. And most of the time, franchise brands or franchisors fail is because they had the wrong mindset, right? They were out for the buck, or they're out for the quick fix, or they wanted to do this side of the business, and get 1,000 stores was always the goal. And look, some of the best franchise brands in the world are under 300 units. I mean, it's just there's just a reality of quality can be maintained at certain levels. So and nothing against the big guys, because I think Jersey Mike's over 2,000 stores is one of the best quality brands out there in the true franchise model.
For sure.
So it can be done, but it's a real rarity, right? And so I just think that you and I have a unique perspective with our backgrounds and our histories to look at something and say, yeah, that's something I want to be involved with. And to your credit, it's the same thing. You said, I knew you could choose anything. And I was in a race to get my hands on you as fast as we could, because, it's about building the right team with the right mindset. It's really mindset first. So,
For sure.
to all the franchisees and prospective large franchisees out there, really it's about mindset and fit, right? At the end of the day, anybody can write a check, but it's really about finding that relationship, finding that partnership. Let's start to wrap this up. How do you, when you're having conversations with investment groups and large franchisees out there, and even new and emerging folks that want to put a group together like you did and become a franchisee of a brand that's emerging in a new market, like Pepper Lunch is growing in the United States, how do you um, think about, and how do you articulate to these folks that the fit matters, and what the fit is? Like, how do you determine fit? How do you do that matchmaking internally?
Oh, good question. And I want to add one point, the point you added before about, like, brands that are just looking for the quick buck or the right brands. I'm also going to add that 100% of the brands that ended up becoming massively successful, they actually didn't even plan to franchise. Like, when people come to us, I'm pretty sure you experience the same. Like this brand is ready for franchising. This is built for franchising. I'm already feeling like their focus is off.
Right.
So anyway, that's for another topic for another time. But as far as the right fit, a lot of it, I mean, that's why we love working with multi-unit operators, right? Because they've been through the gamut. They know what it's like to work with franchisors. They know what it's like to scale multiple stores, so that when they see a business model that makes sense, they get it right away. Just like you and I chatted earlier about, like, for example, the Halal Guys. I mean, love the brand, but also, because they've already been operators, like, being able to see what Pepper Lunch can offer is kind of like a no brainer when they as something to expand into. And so, right now the biggest concern they have is labor. The biggest concern they have is consistency and control, if they're so distracted with that, they can't focus on being hospitable, right? They can't focus on delighting customers. So I love the initiative that, the leadership team at Pepper Lunch is focused on, where they're trying to focus on recapturing food costs, and also the business model requires less labor. The business has been investing heavily into technology and more efficiencies, and all these things are working to where it becomes less of a distraction and more focus can be towards delighting the customer. It's truly hard to delight customers at massive scale if the margins are like 1% or they're underwater, right? So money is important, but it's important only because it can be a distraction to like taking better care of the customer. So the multi-unit franchisees that we would like to work with are folks who are committed to hospitality. They care about the customers. They want to delight them, and they want that to be the business model, not delight customers when they get a moment. That is the business model, but they can't do that if their margins are always like under attack. It's like being distracted. So I'd say that franchisees who they definitely care about hospitality would be the right fit for us. And a lot of it's just more like philosophical too, but that's just case by case. But hope that answers your question.
For sure. Let's wrap this up with some fun get to know yous. What are these collectibles? Is that a particular type of collectible?
A lot of it's just things that
Are they Funko? What are they?
They're not Funko. Everyone always says it's Funko.
Funko's the bigger ones.
Yeah. So let's see if I can pull this out. So when I was in Singapore, do you know Pop Mart?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's these vending machines that pop out like that, that dispense like these incredibly high quality toys. And I think it's Japanese actually in nature. But these artists just do such an incredible job on like creating toys. And so I don't know, it's just from our travels. We just got obsessed with collecting them.
You have a few of them, including the scary Pennywise, which I see over the other shoulder.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got to figure out how to get Pepper Lunch's own mascot set up in one of these characters.
Please do.
All right. So Nike or Adidas?
Nike, all the way.
Black shirt or white shirt?
Black.
Who cuts your hair?
Local barber, 5 minutes from me, out of convenience.
How many times a week do you eat Pepper Lunch?
Oh my gosh. Since I started working with the brand and meeting with folks, I'm eating 2-3 times a week.
How many times do you eat at Halal Guys in a month now?
I actually eat maybe once or twice a month.
I was just seeing if you had enough of it so far in your life, if you keep coming back to it.
Oh, still love it. Still love it.
Paul Tran, really appreciate your time. Really enjoyed talking to you. I knew it would be a great conversation about hospitality and our industry. And I appreciate having you on and look forward to having you back again another time.
Oh, the respect and the love is the same. Thank you for having me. And hopefully we can add value to those we seek to serve. So thank you, Troy.
Thank you for listening to The Pineapple Perspective. If you loved today's episode, leave a review and a 5-star rating. I look forward to welcoming you back next time.